So, we have, one more, issue, and, we have, Mike Hall with us and grab his seat, Mike,
Thank you.
and, so we're gonna hear a little bit, you all got weeds.
I do, sir.
I think we all have those. And, and, um, so you can tell us about what, what you're interested in and last, I think it was last week, I was at a thing upstairs and they were talking about using lasers to kill weeds. And if you know anything about that, at sometime at the end, we can chat about that.
Happy to.
Yeah. So welcome, and I know you met the committee, but
Brian Collmore representing the Rutland District.
Irene Runner, Chittenden North, including Fairbanks.
Brian Campion, Bennington County. Good to
and Reggie Westman from Memorial County is in the empty chair. He's invisible, I say her.
Yeah,
And,
those are the toughest questions.
and I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans County.
Yes.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll introduce myself, Michael Baldwin out of Royalton. I do want to express my appreciation, and your kind of the open time, because I'm here to help you today. I'm here to answer questions and give you what I see on the ground from what I do every day. So again, I'm very appreciative. Thank you, Linda, for setting this up and for having me come in. Again, I'm here to help. My business is the company Got Weeds with a question mark. And yes, the t-shirts are very popular and that's great, but I don't use chemicals. I've been asked to, I've gotten certified. I've never had a need to, and my clients are thrilled that I don't use herbicides. As far as my credibility, you take it or leave it, you assign that as you wish. I work for King Arthur Baking Company. There are certain species you will not find on their property, and that's good because there are certain species like wild parsnip that are a public hazard. Taking it further, there are clients of mine who have been approached with a message saying, we don't feel so good after visiting your property. I think our family must be suffering from the pesticides you use on your landscape. Now, I'm not going to reveal which client that was, but he was able to respond and say, we don't use pesticides here. I hope you feel better and please come back and visit. So the thought of a liability there is quite powerful. I worked for, in the last several years, getting the parsnip off of the Butterworks farm. And I don't know who that transitions to yet, but the lasers were fantastic clients.
That's in the process of maybe being sold.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll continue that conversation. Again, brilliant people. Jack would have said he learned a lot from me, but that's just because he's generous. He was both Jack and Ann, very generous. So my client list includes South Burlington, the city of, the parks in South Burlington, town of Randolph, town of Norwich, Norwich and Lyme across the river. I help the Lexington bike path through Lexington, Concord, to Watertown, Mass. I mean, they've got the same bike path issues there that you have here. And they've got more people, so they can really unleash the people power. Finally, I'm even working overseas with several colleagues in Ireland, addressing the exact same questions. The EU has challenges that we don't have here. Very difficult to move soil, period. You don't move soil in the EU without paying the big bucks. And there are good reasons not to do that.
What do you mean by moving soil?
If you're gonna do a project, a construction or some kind of project in Ireland, you will deal with the issues you have on site. So Japanese knotweed in the last 2 years, I've now seen in 3 septic systems. That's the future for us here, is that you have to have the special sand. You get the sand from the river, because you gotta have that filtrate, it's spec'd out, you gotta have certain sand in a septic system. But if there's a knotweed fragment along the river and it gets into that septic system, it's gonna be very happy. And I know of 3 locations already where that's been an issue. So in Iowa, they're trying to get away from chems. There are some climate similarities to here, but they're linking me up as well to a professor who studies PFAS compounds. So that's who I am. I work across New England. I'm on the ground, I prune apple trees. I'm trying to figure out the mystery of why our trees are dying at an alarming rate. And no one wants to talk about the drought that happened for 4 years, going into a 5th year last year, but we did have 4 years of drought. Last year was the wet year. It started out dry. Again, I do mostly apple trees, but I do trees all over the state, hazard trees and try to bring trees back to life, which is actually possible. So that's kind of me. Again, I'm based in Royalton and I've been doing this work since 2010. And I'm not looking for work. I have no conflict of interest today. I'm not here looking for another job. I've actually helped 3 people start a similar business without using chemicals. So without any support from the state, the Fed, the community, there are now 3 more businesses here in the state paying taxes employing non-chemical weed control. And it's not a credit to us, myself and them. I give a full credit to the clients who say, we want to do this method because we don't want to deal with pesticides on our landscape. At least not herbicides. Whether they have to deal with rodenticides or mosquito control is another issue. But so that's the story of the business. I think I'd like to just read what I put together, invite you to ask questions, and then I'll put the questions in at the end if I don't have the immediate answer. And I'm happy to track down an answer, finalize this document, and give it back to Linda on Friday. So if you can stump me with a question, that's great, and I'll do my best to track down the answer. I do communicate with the folks in DC, trying to look into the Farm Bill, trying to work with the Environmental Working Group and tell them I'm in Royalton. I've got PFAS in my water. How do I get on your map? And a lot of times it's a long process to get a response. I'm working with the Vermonters taking action against cancer. I've got their plan here, which I'll bring up later. So I'm here today primarily to share with you my sense of urgency regarding PFAS, PFAS, PFOS chemical compounds. I'm here also to be a resource to help with information I've come across or discovered in the past 20 years. So again, it's kind of a grouping, PFAS, PFOA, PFOS. It's all fluorinated carbon compounds. I've tested ways to illustrate that. And basically a PFAS compound, if you want to play with stick figures, and we could do it right here at the table, if all of us reached out and held hands, carbon can have 4 bonds. So if we all held hands, that would be a carbon ring. A bond to the left and a bond to the right. If I come in and put a fluorine on your head and on your feet, that's the 3rd and 4th connection for the carbon atom. So these fluorinated carbon chains, the one I have in my water at my house has 7 fluorine atoms on the molecule. It's powerful. It's very difficult to make this stuff, energy intensive, and it's very difficult to break it down. That's why they last forever. Forever. Longer than we last.
Where does that all come from?
I'm gonna talk
We
about
always
that.
had it.
No, we've not always had it because there's no background level of it, as there is with, say, arsenic or lead or radon. There is no background level. It's basically 0. So where is it coming from? I thought of some colorful ways to introduce that as well, and here they are. I'm an ex-military guy. I did demolitions. I still have the 10. So I did something right. You can ask me, would I prefer to work on 1 big bomb or 75 little bombs? And that's why cluster bombs are illegal. So I pity the poor schmucks, the poor good workers in Ukraine Russia, wherever they are, having to deal with cluster bombs, because you don't know where they are, they open up and 200 bomblets drop all over the landscape. It's the same with PFAS. It's not one big bomb that you can walk up to and hold your breath and defuse, and if something goes wrong, well, you know, you don't feel a thing. But the little ones, the 200 of them scattered all over city playgrounds, is a real mess. So that's why cluster bombs are illegal, theoretically. And that's why I would argue PFAS should be illegal, especially in pesticide form, because it is essentially distributed the same way a cluster bomb is. There will be people that contradict me on that, and I take that challenge. The other way to look at it is, if anyone skis in the group, you might think of skiing down your favorite mountain. Is it easier to avoid one large tree on the hillside, or 75 young elementary students out for their first day learning how to ski? I think most of us would prefer to avoid one large tree or one individual skier rather than trying to ski through 75 saplings or 75 mobile, excited kindergartners learning how to ski for the first time. So again, it's a distribution issue is what I'm trying to illustrate. I know the bomb comparison is dark, but that's the way it is. So again, I'm gonna share some of the things here that I've learned over the last 20 years, and that begins with a sense of urgency. I want to encourage you that S25 and S197 need to pass today, this session, this year, not because the situation is urgent or nearing crisis status. In fact, we are beyond that now. We were in crisis with these chemicals 20 years ago, and we did almost nothing outside the state of West Virginia. Linda has the connection. If you'd like to watch a 2-minute video on Dark Waters, the story of the DuPont factory in Parkersburg, West Virginia, we can watch that. It's 2 minutes. I can be a spoiler and tell you it's not fun to watch. The humans end up sick and the cows die. So 2 minutes, it's up to you if you want to watch that. The name of the film is Dark Waters. The farmer's name is Tennant, and the defendant was DuPont. 2009 to 2015.
Okay, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna try.
Okay, we can play that.
You don't have to leave it. You might get some learning.
Can I get a run?
You don't want learning.
Are you getting sound?
Yeah.
Carry that up a little.
I incorporated the defense attorney. So I defend chemical holdings. Well, I can defend me.
Satisfies.
That's, I'm not sure it's even coming out of
How
house.
many did you lose? 190 calves. You tell me nothing's wrong here. It's a small matter for a big brain. How young is it? The bar or you? That's chemicals I've got to get. I've seen documents. I don't understand it. They're hiding something. That chemical, but it drinking. Something on what's going on. Well, you know, whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water. DuPont. Better living through chemistry. It's our DNA.
Please tell me what the hell's going on.
DuPont is knowingly poisoning 70,000 local residents for the last 40 years. You know, they only did nothing. You want to put your career on the toilet, it's on power hands. You want to take everything that you know and turn it against an atomic American company like an informant. Is that right? Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Yes. They have all the money, all the firepower, and they'll use it. I know. I was one of them. Our government is captive to DuPont. They're trying to force you to make me stop.
He was willing to risk his job, his family, for a stranger. I need his help.
The system is rigged. They want us to think you're protected. We protect us. We do.
Thank you. The young girl on the bicycle, I think the importance of that scene is that her teeth were black. Because she can drink them. You notice that? Powerful film. Thanks for watching it. I appreciate that. It is a 2-hour film if you'd like to watch the full thing. So we were in ethical crisis decades before things came to light in West Virginia. And admittedly, that's a factory, that's a pinpoint location, but 70,000 residents. It was all in the name of profit and hubris and fascination with all things chemical. And we ignored the known dangers and we spread PFAS compounds all over the planet. We knew the hazards, but we chose money over the reproductive health of humanity. I have a book here, written in the 90s, no less, that talks about the reproductive health of humanity, or stolen future. So this is hard to read, but the key item in here is that in 1992, 30 years ago, male sperm counts were approaching 50% decline. 1992. So for someone younger than me, we're sitting at about 30% now in the 2020s. I'm extending the line. Who knows what the sperm count is anymore? But amazingly, they had data to compare from the 30s to the 80s. So over 50 years, almost 50% drop in sperm count. That's insane. Rats have enough. You can kill 99% of the population of rats or impact them reproductively, and it doesn't change their ability to continue making baby rats. That you can irradiate 99% of their sperm and they still make baby rats. Humans don't have that luxury. We're right on the edge and we're already over the edge. So that's this book here, again, written over 30 years ago. So the crisis is now, and the need is for a blanket approach, a universal action. When we have thousands of these synthetic chemicals, with more invented on a regular basis, there's no way to address them in singular fashion. The one-at-a-time approach with new chemicals and our national void regarding a precautionary principle have led us to this point in time. The associated illness data from West Virginia is quite sickening. It's disgusting. The health impacts of these chemicals have already been proven with 70,000 victims in West Virginia. And they don't even call them people. When they found in DuPont's records, they were basically an exposed human being was labeled a receptor. And that's a scientific term. And that's very, to me, that's very disturbing. So the proof is there, the connection was there, and the money followed the proof, and DuPont paid huge money, and they're still paying for the medical follow-up a decade later. There are other cases with, say, atrazine, Syngenta in Illinois, just for the record, it's not that one case. So the only true solution here is to ban production of PFAS compounds. Currently, the sequence of a toxin, of a PFAS toxin, is this: invent it, produce it, market it, consume it, suffer because of it, search for treatments, and then spend a fortune as an individual. Since we cannot seem to manage the consumption piece in that sequence, and since we make numerous exemptions in our regulations anyway, we simply need to break this destructive chain at its front end, at invention and production. It's literally too late to do anything else. The reason these are so, I'll stray for a second and just talk about carbon chains. You can string together, as I said, we could hold hands, we could bring another person into the circle. That's 2 more places we can stick fluorine. We can bend things around and just keep tweaking and stay 10 years ahead of regulations. That's why there's literally 15,000 of these compounds. Make the chain longer, shorter, twist it, whatever. So it's too late to appeal to a sense of corporate ethics, as you saw. It's too late to wait any longer. It's just that simple. Now is the necessary word, if you wish to be on the right side of history. I can share with you too what PFAS compounds do at the individual homeowner level. I tested my own well water last year, 2023. Sadly, the results put me at 20 parts per trillion for the 5 compounds that EPA acknowledges with safety guidelines. Guidelines that are decades behind and in the process of being updated. But no, we should not wait on the EPA for updates. I have messaged the agency's specific PFAS address multiple times in 2023, still waiting on a reply. We cannot wait on this agency's inertia. I messaged the state office, Vermont, and got useful information on what type of filter I could buy. So me, I'm the one who does the buying. I didn't start the mess, but I'm clearly holding the bag here. So I'm at around $1,500 at this point for the cost of filters and testing and the necessary technical consults. Are we all supposed to pay that statewide at just on an individual basis? Finally, you should know that I tested more than just my well water. Because I'm curious. I tested a pesticide product purchased at the local hardware store. Interesting, alarming, I suppose, although I'm beyond that, to see how much more there is of certain compounds when a tablespoon of pesticide is included in the sample. So I tested my well water and I read 20 parts per trillion right at that threshold we are all aware of. There's more than just those 5. There were another 8 in there. When you add a tablespoon of insecticide carefully, don't let it touch anything else, just 1 dollop into the sample container, my readings of PFBA, perfluorobutanoic acid, multiplied by a factor of 8. So that's not, I've repeated the experiment with my water at $300 a pop. I'm not gonna keep continuing this experiment because it's starting to get a little pricey. But that's proof, I'm the one that drinks it, and that's all the proof I need, that this pesticide really does not belong on the shelf at the local hardware store. I can talk about the health issues caused by PFBA. Basically, there's an awful lot of gaps in our knowledge, in our database. You try to read into testicular cancer, thyroid issues, and you read deep and deep in its EPA documents, and then you come to the end and you find that it was on a sample size of 20 people out of Finland or Spain, and they acknowledge we need another 70,000 people, like in the DuPont case, we need more data. But there's no emphasis on it. And I don't mean to slam them because they invited me to their nice meeting in a couple weeks. The 2025 Vermont Cancer Plan, a forward-looking document, supposed to be no mention of pesticides or PFAS. We're basically saying we're not gonna think about this stuff for another 5 years. Well, that ain't helping me, and it's not me that I'm concerned about, it's the kids, I don't have to repeat that, I know you know that. Again, good people trying to do good things, but they don't know where to start. I mean, I'll bring it up again in 2 weeks, again, they are receptive to my message. But how does it happen that there's nothing in this document? Something's wrong. That doesn't smell right to me.
So why would they leave that? I mean, we're here to try to help our
Yes.
citizens. So if they're having that meeting, why wouldn't that be in there?
Ellen Kaler was in the room earlier, and I presented at the Farm to Plate conference in November. And the Farm to Plate document, I have a key page from it here. That is the only document in the state that actually calls for a reduction in pesticides as a goal, 20% by 2030. Now, I've talked to them, Jake and people through the years and said, you guys, you got to get this payment for ecosystem services, the Global Warming Solutions Act. Please include the fact that pesticides have a 5-fold CO2 footprint. 5. It doesn't get into the document. It does. I don't even get it. Don't take it personally, but I need to be at the meeting and say, look, produce it takes energy, transport it to Vermont takes energy, apply it on the land takes energy. When it breaks down, it turns into, this is good, formaldehyde and CO2. Those aren't particularly helpful on the landscape. And then when it gets into your gut and ruins your bacterial, your microbiome and the soil microbiome, the land can't hold carbon or water anyway. So 5-fold CO2 footprint just on pesticides. Yet Ellen's group, the Farm to Plate, is the only one that has put it into an actual number, time bound for a goal. I salute that, but we all need to do that.
Well, we deal with that in ag, because we plant a lot of corn
Yes.
and soybeans and trying to, like earlier, before you started today, I said, do you know anything about these laser beams that, well, because we're trying to get away from pesticides and but we have to have an alternative for our crops and to swap them out. And so that's where we are, but we're certainly interested in talking about it and deal with it. We'll deal with it.
I take your point, and it is a valid point. And I would say that really the path moving forward would be a gradual reduction over the right time frame. You can't go cold turkey from conventional to organic, that's a shock to the land. But you can spread it out over 3 to 5 years. And you're right, give people alternatives. Or I want to make the point today that pesticides extend beyond agriculture. That's kind of, I wanted to make sure I hit that point hard. There's no reason why farms could not be brought onto the payroll to do the right of way management on their property and to the right and left, to the east and west. Why not? They've got the goats, the critters that would munch down the multiflora rows instead of throwing me in there to get all ripped to pieces. Goats, grazing animals, flaming, there are many techniques. And I would love to see Payment for Ecosystem Services acknowledge that farms can manage land and can manage invasive species or just amaranth, Palmer's amaranth, crop related troublesome species. Rather than doing sprays right up to within 10 feet of a water channel or having to spray an entire railroad bed or whatnot. So I acknowledge, yeah, our alternatives are important. I'll keep moving and we can hit more of them at the end here. I'm gonna try to close with the issue of liability. For the Vermont legislature to know what it knows and then to continue allowing pesticide formulations to be sold. Here's the problem, to any customer in stores all over the state. I mean, that's willful and it's negligent and it's perhaps complicit. You can still support agriculture. You can still support farms and farmers. But the comprehensive term pesticide applies to a lot more than just agriculture. Agriculture is a big piece of the picture. And yes, people are sharing secrets and giving pesticide advice online, which is really not legal. But they're telling you, this is what you do in your driveway. Mix this with that and do it. And that's crazy. Because it all goes downhill into the river or the lake. That's not legal. I don't do it. But that's the reality. So agriculture is a piece. But the uses that I have seen, spraying poison ivy along the city bike path. That's great until the dog gets into it and it gets onto fur. And the vets have told me that these things stick more to fur than they do to skin, which I don't quite understand that, but okay. The dog goes home, sits in the car, sits on the couch, sits in the bed. That's not good. And we're not tracking with the veterinarians all the diseases that basically dogs, they're the ones that people are out walking in the parks. I was at a park in Northfield for less than an hour. And I could see, I know where they're spraying. I keep going to see, I'm curious to see if the chemicals are working. Year 5, still plenty of knotweed. If I was out here with harsh language and my techniques, there wouldn't be any knotweed you'd be able to see. But in the time I was there, 4 different groups of people came out and walked their dog. That's not good. And there were no flags, no markers. So someone's treating a space, not flagging it, and the dog is there the same day. I see that as a problem. Who knows how many children. So spraying poison ivy along the bike path, poison ivy is a native species, but it's a problem species. Reckless spraying at a daycare facility, regular treatments on golf courses, homeowners spraying insecticide all over their yards, and which way the wind is blowing. If you try to go camping in Vermont and someone pulls up next to you and they don't like mosquitoes, I didn't bring the jug in today because I wasn't sure I could get it in the building. But I procured a jug of insecticide. It's the one that I tested. And it says right on there, this kills over 200 insects. There's nothing stopping somebody from going into a campground and using the entire jug on their campsite. And I'm trying to grill right next door. I mean, that's a problem. You get that, and there's nothing to do with agriculture there. That's just a personal preference. I am deathly afraid of mosquitoes and ticks, by the way, just for the record. The state is interested in my experience and they've asked me to keep more tick samples because I recorded 102 tick encounters last year, which is exponentially more than I've ever experienced. So the ticks are like this. So I understand the issue with pests, with ticks and mosquitoes. I'll touch on that more. I want to finish up here. I've seen stumps of buckthorn painted in the interest in quests to improve bird habitat. So you're trying to improve bird habitat, but never mind the lizards and the insects and everybody else who has to deal with the residue that lasts decades. Maybe glyphosate breaks down in 30 days, 60 days, depends. But the secret ingredients, the inerts, the PFAS compounds that my evidence shows are in there, they don't break down. I know a farmer out in Montana still after 8 years can't get her land to grow. It's high desert, it's dry. That's part of the reason. But I think it's aminopyrrolate. The stuff is still there 8 years later. They're trying to go organic, can't get anything, can't get the toxin out of the land. And it's not just the herbicide, it's the accompanying secret ingredients. So right now we have pesticides all over the shelves available to everyone with occasional bans where we see them needed. We need to flip that. Partly because we're decades late in pulling something off the shelf, but what we need is universal bans with then exceptions to accommodate specific needs for corn, specific needs for X, Y, and Z. But right now we've got this kind of universal blanket availability in the name of agriculture. Problem. We don't need aisles and aisles full of bug spray at box stores. No, we don't need cluelessness in spraying the driveway with toxins that run downhill into the lake just because we don't like crabgrass. So here's a key point. If the corporations are going to get liability immunity, I'm checking into the Farm Bill language because that's out there. The corporations are going to get immunity from the coming lawsuits. And if we know citizens are going to get sick, that leaves the cost of cleanup and healthcare treatments as a burden solely borne by the people. And that's outright wrong. So you talk about funding, it's in 197 to support healthcare monitoring. That's a great idea, but I encourage you to go beyond yourselves. The funding needs to come from the corporations, not us. It's their product, and if it does last forever, they should be responsible forever. Quite simple. That's what eventually happened in California, PG&E with the contamination, Aaron Brockovich, and that's how it went down in West Virginia. The corporations got hooked hard.
You know what happened in Bennington as well.
And Bennington,
Yeah.
And the corporation
Right.
did.
yes.
Yeah.
And I communicate all the time with Judith Schwartz, and she's a good egg, and
My name.
she knows you're here today, yes. Bennington's another example, thank you. So I'm trying to show you the financial path that doesn't make us ring up big dollars here, because that's a big deal. We're trying to take care of Vermont farmers, Vermont children, and Vermonters of every stripe. And we'll be known as a great place to visit if we're proactive with pesticides. But if not, it'll be like, sure, come visit, but don't drink the water. And what about the craft beer? And what about the honey? Are we able to drink those and spend our money? So I urge you here to resist the temptations to dilute these bills beyond recognition or beyond meaning, pass them as they are, as strong as possible. And once we have that in place, let's work to address some of the things like you brought up. So I think I can conclude. I gave examples. I brought materials. I'm not a fan of atrazine because it's essentially synthetic estrogen. I know that's big in the world of corn, but we've got enough issues running around. And again, this book from the 90s talks about issues in Great Britain, issues with gender confused fish that were discovered in Lake Champlain a few years ago. That's nothing new. That hit the newspaper. But I was like, I've been reading about that for 30 years. What's the big deal? Great Britain. So it's all about connecting the dots, and I'm trying to do that for you today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, you mentioned S-25, which we voted on last year unanimously, by the way. It's in the House Human Services Committee now, and it's been there actually since 23. So I don't know why that's not moving. 197 is in Ginny Lyons Committee right now. I don't know how soon they might be voting that out. So that's just sort of a background. I'm not a chemist, so I don't understand. What is it about these chemicals that makes them forever, that they just don't go away?
You'll get a better answer from a true chemist. But I asked my dad, because he's an organic chemist, and I said, you gotta keep it simple here, James. So he said to me, he remembers the names of them, of the people behind the work, inventing, rolling them out. And he said, the problem, Mike, is that carbon, you look at the periodic table, carbon, silicon, certain chemicals, certain elements on the table are very structural. Carbon is one of them, and that's the building block for cellulose and a lot of important compounds on the planet. Silicon has its features, but carbon is the one that they're using to fluorinate. And the issue is that it's a very simple compound at the end. It takes a lot of energy to make it. They use really nasty stuff to make it. Hydrofluoric acid. A lot of heat involved, and then so a lot of energy goes into the bond.
Yeah.
And keeping it simple for all of us, it would then take a lot of energy to break it again and control where it goes or what happens to it. Because some of these breakdown products, you don't want them either. Like I mentioned, formaldehyde. So the smaller the carbon chain, I learned this, the smaller the number of carbons. So mine, PFBA, is 4 carbons in there. The more fluid, the more transportable it is, essentially. When you have 8, 9, 10 carbons, it's a little longer of a train. It's a little harder to go through the tunnels. It's got charges and it's a little bulkier. But when you have these very simple carbon chains, and you put something simple like fluorine, because it's at the top of the close to the top of the table where the elements are simpler. They're smaller. There's smaller protons and neutrons and electrons. When you get bigger atoms, apparently, to my understanding, those can be manipulated a little. Those would be the uraniums and the plutoniums and all those. Not that I encourage messing with those. But it's just it's almost like you can't break them down any further. They're as low as they're going to get from an energy standpoint without putting in a lot of energy. Plants use the sun because it takes that much energy.
And as I understand it, this was not found naturally occurring. This was something that was, I don't know, invented, but created by humans.
Synthesized.
Okay.
Correct.
And you take same thing as what we've got problem we have in our schools, right? You know, like North Country's, it's not our town.
No.
No.
North Country High School, a lot of schools are, you know, having tremendous problems
Right.
with this air bin. And put filters in, doesn't work. Or it doesn't work.
So I love the carpeting, the fabrics, and the AstroTurf. You address that, which is appropriate. We just need to get into. I mean, I do the apple trees at Royalton Soro High School. If we can keep the toxins off school grounds, that's a big thing. But the start point really is nail the toxins. Do not support them with purchasing with the money that goes into the bank of the corporation. And then if exceptions are needed, I mean, I would argue if you need to spray for mosquitoes, convince me. Okay, I don't want Triple E, I don't want West Nile, I don't want any of that. If you argue to me, Mike, we need to do something about mosquitoes. Okay, you've crossed your T's, dotted your I's, you've done, okay, we can be careful, okay, thank you. I would say, well, proceed, but let's make sure you're not getting into any source protection areas, number one, and let's not do the right of way or any other chemical applications in that vicinity that year. Because the problem is, at the end of the day, cumulative effects. If you keep putting atrazine or keep putting PFBA or PFAS on the same ground year after year, it doesn't break down. If some of it washes into the lake, well, that's not good. But it continues to accumulate. And that's what legacy chemicals are about. Cumulative effects is a big deal. Every time it rains in Vermont, we get somewhere between 8 and 10 herbicides. Whatever comes out of the Midwest, dicamba on the soybeans comes here, because we are the tailpipe.
So what about
That's
the,
that's USGS data.
what about the, laser treatment on weeds?
So-
You read about that yet?
I've not read about laser specifically, and I don't have one, and I also do not have radioactive carbon, which I would love to have, because I'd like to see if Japanese knotweed. If I put some radioactive carbon into the trees nearby, we know that trees exude sugar to feed the bacteria and the fungi. So Japanese knotweed is particularly notoriously tough. I've got a site that's in year 14. And I own it, I'm on that site, it's not going anywhere, but that's pretty tough. When you have no photosynthesis, how is it staying alive? I would suspect it's drawing on the sugar from the nearby oak and maple trees and somehow parasitizing the larger network. Now, lasers and hot water and steam and even dry ice is what they want to use in Ireland, because that's a very fast release of heat. They don't get deep freeze. Their frost depth is not, their freeze depth is not 4 feet. They were tickled to hear that here. They go maybe a centimeter deep every other year. So they don't get the frost going deep. So that's actually helpful to the invasive species, I think, because they can go dormant, but they don't have to struggle to stay alive. So if you use CO2, dry ice, can you get a heat burst in there and kill seeds and rhizomes? To be seen, but they've asked me to come over and make them smarter, but I think I have a lot to learn from them as well. Lasers would have to be very specific, even hot water. The guy I saw in Norway, it's got to be 97 degrees Celsius, exactly, and they have a little robot. You could do an airport, and I really wish the Middlebury, Vermont could buy one of these machines and use it all summer at the airports. We'll probably go down the railroad tracks as well. Put a flag on it, a bicycle flag. But if it's steam treated, the entire airport fence or the railroad ties, that would, I don't want people working on the railroad. It's not a safe place to work, so I get it, that we need options. But I think steam, it's energy intensive, but there is solar power at our disposal, but nothing beats presence. And that's a message I have a hard time getting out to people. You can't control these weeds until you're smarter than they are. And you gotta be out there getting wet, getting bit, getting ripped up by thorns. And you gotta use this, because this is the most powerful tool we have.
Well, any other questions for Mike?
Thank you.
I've overwhelmed you.
Yes.
No, well, we covered a lot of ground here in 45 minutes.
I appreciate your time.
Well, and we appreciate you giving us the time.
Happy to.
But we're on to it.
I am aware, yes.
And,
Yeah.
and,
And maybe touch base with health and welfare, sorry to interrupt. So maybe touch base with health and welfare and the house on where these bills are.
I will check with the house.
Yeah.
Jamie Lyons in Health and Welfare, 'cause yeah, they should get a little learning. Yeah, not much, but a little.
But
You don't want to give them the whole log you gave us.
Well, you kindly took my point, which is showing that pesticides is more than an agricultural issue.
Sure.
So thank you.
And,
Thank you.
yeah, very good. Thank you, committee, and